Everybody, welcome back to the Insiders Lounge. Today we have another special episode and a little bit of a new one today. We are joined by Adam and Jacek from the Football Talent Show. We are kickstarting a new show. What is it, coming this week? So it'll be out, I think, 3 days before this episode goes live because we'll be out on Saturday. But Adam and Jacek, Adam, if you want to start off with a quick introduction, and then Jacek, and then we'll get things going.
Hey guys, it's great to be here with you, Chad. We've known each other for longer, but it's the first time I've been on the podcast. Jacek, I guess, is your, first returning guest? Is that true?
Second, but he makes it very close.
Okay, so he's going for the hat trick after this one, but it's my first time. A little bit about me. I come from a football background. I think it's always good to come from a football background when you do a football podcast. I played my whole youth career in an MLS academy in the US, so the highest level of academy football. Then I played 4 years now in the German 4th division here, again at pretty much the highest semi-pro level you can play in Europe. And throughout that time also started to do a lot of work in scouting, in match analysis, working with different clubs, companies, broadcasters, and then me and Jacek obviously stumbled across each other's path. Jacek will introduce himself in a second, but if you do anything in scouting, then you've either heard of or spoken to Jacek Kulig. So yeah, we spent the last 2 years together, hit it off, and want to now take it to the next level and start some audio stuff. And I think there's no better place to do that than with the network that Chad's built here with the Insiders Lounge and to kind of couple those two things.
Yeah, and me, I'm Jacek. So Chad, great to be here for the second time. The first time was amazing, so really pleased to be here. And yeah, you may know me from the last episode. It was, I think, 2 years ago, and Football Talent Scout grew since then. I hit over 500,000 followers across all social media, and as Adam said, we are starting a new journey. I think it was the next step for FTS always, like to go via audio and then YouTube, so video. But for now, we are doing audio, and yeah, it's so exciting. This project is really an exciting one. I think in 2 days. So as you said, Chad, 3 days after these episodes, before these episodes, there will be our first one. So get ready.
I think the timing sort of worked out perfectly. We released the first episode of the Football Talent Show, then we have this a few days later to get a better understanding, I think, of you guys, the show's background, and get a good understanding of the overall project. We always, the first question I know you guys ask, and similar on my podcast, is always, what is your first footballing memory? So I decided to switch things up for this episode and go, what is your coolest or most unique experience that you've had in the realm of scouting in the football world as a whole? So Adam, if you want to kick things off with your first or your most unique footballing memory that you've had.
I'll kick off with that, but Chad, I want to give you also my first football memory because I think it's
okay.
High
Go for
time
it. Yeah,
we
you
share
can do
that
both
as well. But I think my favorite football memory, does it have to be scouting or can it just be football in general?
No, it can be anything around the footballing world.
I would say, to be honest, like I said, I mean, I've played in bigger stadiums right in front of fans and stuff, but honestly, the favorite football memory is just like probably U19 going on a 10-day preseason in Florida and just spending time with friends, like playing Monopoly, spending time at dinners, just spending time with all your friends that you kind of take for granted in the moment, but looking back are some of the best times. I would say, yeah, the people you meet along the way. It's a little cheesy from just 5 minutes into the podcast, but to be honest, that's really the case. It's really about the people you meet, and also the scouting team, the people I meet. Like Jacek's one of my best friends now. Florian Blusche, who I've worked with for a while as well. You as well. Don't think I'm leaving you out. So yeah, it's really the people you meet through football often makes the football what it is.
Yeah, and I must say, the whole Nordinsa experience with you guys was amazing. But to be 100% honest, my favorite football scouting memory was when I made a report on a 17-year-old Turkish player, and like he wasn't really well known. He wasn't Arda Güler or Semih Kılıçsoy. He was an unknown academy player in Turkey, and I watched him during a game, I think under 17 game, and yeah, I liked him, and I decided, why not? I will make a report on him. So I made a report, and probably 1 or 2 weeks later, I got an email from his father. And yeah, it was one of the most amazing things that happened in my life. He sent me a big email, and he said that, yeah, that his son actually saw the report, and he was actually going to quit football. And when he saw the report, it gave him an extra motivation.
Wow.
And the father said, yeah, really, we owe you one, and we will never forget this report. And I think he was born in the USA. He moved to Turkey. They moved back to Turkey when he was 5. But his father said, probably thanks to my report, he received a call up to the youth national team of the US. I think he got a call up for the camp of under 17s or under 18s. And yeah, for me, that email was worth more than any money. So yeah, great memory.
No, it's beautiful from both of your ends. I think it's cool to see the realities of, this is why they call it the beautiful game. I think it's more than just the money or the fame that people see from the biggest stars. I think it's all of these little stories that I'm sure many scouts and people in the industry have from all over. One of the initial things I wanted to do is get a little bit of a background. So we sort of have an initial background from both of you, but now I want to sort of dive into your relationship and how you guys first met, as well as you almost seem to both build quite a good following on Twitter. I know the numbers are sort of quite drastic on one side, but you've both been able to build. Adam, you have the newsletter. Jacek, you obviously have the posts and your website as well. So I'd love to hear sort of where was the initial movement to actually go onto Twitter and start posting your thoughts and feelings about the game. I would love to hear that, Adam, if you want to start.
Yeah, I can start, but I think Jacek's will be more interesting. For me, I mean, I'll go back. I mean, I actually had a degree in journalism that I was starting. So that was kind of always my motivation to get into football writing in general. I mean, I basically only spend my time watching football. So if I do a degree in journalism, there's only one thing I was ever wanting to write about. And I started off on a few small websites, built up kind of a bit of a following, let's not say, but at least a name. And then just basically using Twitter to post content, to spread content. But my tweets were not really very informative back then. They were like, oh, Myron Boadu scored a goal. What a great goal. 1 like. So I think I've gotten a little bit better at Twitter since it's gone on. And then, yeah, through that, you obviously see Jacek very early on and then meet him a little bit later because his following is just enormous in the football Twitter community. And then I think we started speaking after I released a Euro magazine, which I asked him to retweet. A shameless plug that Jacek happily accepted. And Jacek said, yes, I'll give you a retweet, but then you need to make an article for me at some point in return. So I happily did that. And then we stayed in contact. I think the first time we met over Zoom was ahead of the 2020 World Cup in Qatar. So 2021 that was, I think, because it got delayed. And then we saw each other for the first time. I think both of us didn't necessarily expect what they saw on the other side of the camera. I didn't expect this bald Polish guy sitting in a very dimly lit room, and I don't think he expected this weird-looking American guy that dressed way too formally to meet a Polish guy sitting in his room with a cartoon T-shirt on, probably of South Park. And then we stayed in contact, and I would say the first time we really began talking about football all the time was once we again met at Nordensa, where we worked pretty much daily together and got to know each other on a personal level also a bit more.
Yeah,
Jacek, do you have anything to add to that, I guess?
I'm going to be brutally honest here. So the first time I met Adam, I really didn't like him. Like, we decided to make this World Cup series of articles. And then, we set up a video call, and I thought he's Iranian, actually, because Adam Khan, I said, okay, he's a guy from the Middle East, probably. And then I saw this snowball in front of me, a very young guy, and we started talking about this project. And then I'm a guy who loves to discuss about football, and when I meet a guy who I know that likes football. I just want to talk about football for hours. And Adam was like, okay, we finished talking about the project. And he said, okay, bye. And I was like, what the hell? And where's my conversation? Where's my rewards? Like, and yeah, I said, okay, he's such a cold guy. Such he's like he's not a nice guy. And yeah, probably he was very shy back then. He was very young as well. But yeah, I remember the first moments. I even said to my girlfriend, yeah, he's not a cool guy. I thought he was a cool guy, but he's not. And yeah, after 2 years, when I got to know him, I can finally say, Adam, you're a cool guy.
It's the highest praise I can ever get.
I was going to say stamp of approval.
Yeah,
boom.
And it's recorded as well, so we'll always have the video proof. I would say from my side, going into that meeting, I was thinking, here's Jacek Kulig. You do this right, it'll change your life. You'll never have to look back. Look at who this guy is. 300,000 followers on Twitter. If you make this meeting count, it'll change everything. And it didn't necessarily change everything in the moment, but I can say now that that meeting pretty much changed our lives. It didn't make us rich. Definitely didn't make us rich, but it made us happier, and we've had a lot of better football conversations since then.
It truly made our football knowledge richer, Adam, because I think we learn from each other a lot as well while we talk football, and we talk football almost every day. So
yeah.
Would you have thought of that you guys would be starting a podcast show in a few years later after that first meeting, Jacek?
No way. After this first meeting, I was even considering like canceling the project that we planned for the World Cup. But yeah, life is unpredictable, and yeah, I love spontaneous things, and I think our friendship with Adam is really spontaneous.
I would also say that I didn't think we would ever start the podcast because, I mean, Jacek in technology is really not a match made in heaven. I won't say what happened before this recording, but there were some wild things that happened just to get this started. And back then it was even worse. I mean, I think I saw the top of his head for about 60% of the meeting. And so, yeah, the fact that he has even gotten into a podcast, I would say, is a major step for someone from Jacek's position.
That's very true. Even to open my Twitter account, I needed the help of like 2 friends 10 years ago. So yeah, me and technology, we are not good friends, definitely.
I think we might have skipped it over, but what was the initial story into actually like getting into scouting specifically? I think there's a difference between just being a football fan and yelling your opinions on Twitter, but I think that you guys have both taken quite a step forward in terms of working within the industry of actually scouting for clubs or writing articles on it. So I'd love to hear what was like that inspiration to go, okay, I'm going to go a step beyond just watching football on the weekends.
I can start again. I mean, for me, like you said, the obvious starting point is, I mean, you really need to love football, right? I think that's something that sometimes gets taken for granted because, like I said, I mean, I played football at a really high level. I continue to play football at a really high level. And I mean, you'd be shocked how many people in a football club don't watch football, right? It's like, it feels like even playing the game yourself at a higher level, it really sucks a lot of love out of the game. And I think that's something that I also gained from scouting, is to be able to kind of continue that love for the game. Because if I just only played at the highest level and continue to just focus on basically just playing career, you really lose a lot of the love you have as a child for the game. I mean, professional football is a really dirty game, right? And there's a lot of stuff that goes on that is not at all what you imagine as a kid, or not at all what you imagine as kind of the fan watching behind the television set. So I would say first and foremost, scouting and in general just writing about football was a way for me to also retain kind of the childish enthusiasm for the game. And then otherwise, I would say some pivotal moments were, throughout school we'd have assignments like we had an assignment about writing about a historical figure, and people would choose guys like Martin Luther King, they choose Nelson Mandela, and I chose a 19-year-old Charlie Musonda at the time, who was a rising talent from the Chelsea Academy. He's now, unfortunately, it was maybe the start of a bad scouting career, because at 27, he's a free agent, having last played in the Cyprus First Division. But he was a really, really remarkable talent. And I think that kind of showed from an early age I was really interested in, like, I saw this player, I know about this player, and you'll hear him today and remember Adam was the guy who told you about him so many years later. And I would say the second moment was around the same time. My father's German and my family's from Germany, so we'd often go to Germany in the summer and we try and go to football games, but obviously because of the calendar, it was really difficult. You could never go to like a Bundesliga game, for example. So it'd be like sometimes we would go to like a Europa League qualifier. So I went to one game between Gladbach and FK Sarajevo, like a first round Europa League qualifier. And the other one was a competition called the Audi Cup, which was basically 4 teams from Germany would be invited. I remember Bayern was there, Gladbach was there, and then 2 other clubs. And they would play like a little tournament. Every game was 30 minutes, and they would play basically 5 games and then have a winner. And it was the year where Michael Cuisance was went to Gladbach. And I remember I was sitting there with my dad, and we were both just like, wow, who is this guy? Michael Cuisance, this guy is incredible, and we're here to witness this. He's going to have such a great season. And then he also broke through at Gladbach and was incredible. So that was really another moment where it felt just really cool to be able to say, hey, I discovered this player. I saw him so early, and now to kind of follow him in his career, put him in your Bundesliga fantasy team, even though he barely played at the beginning of the season. So yeah, those are all kind of moments I think that stick in your head.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start with the sad story. So I come from let's say a very difficult family where violence was there all the time. So, and the only days that were peaceful were when the game was on. So my father was watching a game, and there were 2 hours of peace. So and I was watching with him, and so then football was kind of my escape from the difficult childhood. So I started to really read about footballers and remembering all the names, even date of births. And I think I started scouting when I was like 10, probably, because I still remember watching Alessandro Del Piero and making some notes about him. So it was my, let's say, first scouting report. And then I was going to school with this piece of paper and telling my friends, look, Alessandro Del Piero does that and that. And yeah, they didn't care about it. So I still remember also when I went to my cousin and I watched a game of Germany, I don't know, under 15s or under 16s. And I watched this game and I put a name on a piece of paper, and it was Lukas Podolski's name, because he was my favorite player from this game. And then, I was lucky enough to meet Lukas personally, which is my big achievement, let's say. Such a cool guy, by the way. And Adam reached a really good level in football. Sadly, I was trying to, but I never managed to reach a high level. Let's say my career, it wasn't even a career, just an adventure with football. And that when I came to Belgium, when I was 15, 16, and I stopped playing for like 2 years, and then it was just too late to restart. But I always felt really strong in football, like in terms of knowledge. And I think in 2012, I decided to put this passion on paper, on my laptop, and I opened Football Talent Scout. So yeah, that's my football story.
It's funny how all 3 of our stories are so different. I know I'm nowhere near as strong of a scout as both of you, but I first started collecting the stickers, the FIFA World Cup sticker books that they used to do. So 2010 was the first World Cup that I ever watched. My family's background, South African, so it had a huge connection for me. And I fell in love with the Spanish national team. David Villa, Iniesta was an unbelievable team that year. So that was the first initial part. And then I would say FIFA, the video game, was a massive part of it. And then that slowly turned into Football Manager. And then no normal person, I think, plays Football Manager. You have to have some sort of weird obsession with football to play that. So then that naturally grew on to wanting to work in the industry and so on.
Man, I
do
say,
either of you play Football Manager?
Before that, I can say, sorry, Jacek, before that, I would say the 2 biggest kind of material regrets that I have in football is that I don't have my 2010 World Cup Panini sticker album anymore. which I had completely full because we even paid money at the end to get like the remaining 10 stickers that I couldn't find in packs. I remember that. It was a lot of money also. We paid like $1 per sticker, but it had to be done. And my second big regret is that I don't have my first football jersey anymore, which was a Frank Ribery, I think 2007 Bayern jersey. Those are my two regrets. So thanks for bringing that up, Chad. Putting me in a hole here. Yeah, so regarding Football Manager, I was never a Football Manager guy, but I'm with you with kind of just FIFA career mode, always signing young players. I brought Forrest Green to the Premier League once with Bukayo Saka. I don't know if that's really a realistic signing that you could just sign Bukayo Saka as Forrest Green, Tammy Abraham, Charlie Musonda as well. I signed, of course, but yeah, I used FIFA as well as a scouting vessel.
Yeah, so guys, I'm so old as my first Panini album was Estrellas de Europa. It was, I think, in '96. So I still remember, for example, Betis with players like Julian Filipescu or Krzysztof Kowalczyk. So yeah, and about Football Manager, yeah, I didn't start with Football Manager. I actually started with Championship Manager, so the original FM. I think I started with the version number 3, so 97, and I was a fanatic of this game. Really, I could not, like, I was able to not sleep for 2 nights and playing it. I still remember my best save with Udinese and Marcio Amoroso being the Messi of this game. So yeah, huge fan of Football Manager, but sadly these days I don't really have time to play Football Manager because it's such a time eater. I only have one game installed on my laptop, and this game is Championship Manager 2001-2002, and I was a proud member of the Champman team, a team that exists till today, and they still update the game. So for me, it's still the best game ever. I don't really have time to play it, but it always needs to be installed on my computer, always.
Yeah, it's definitely a time eater. You need like a 12-hour flight or something to even get it started the first time you want to play. I wanted to get into the actual show itself, the Football Talent Show. So for the audience, people, you will be able to hear it, and so the audio version on the Insiders Lounge through any of the podcast platforms that we're already on, and then video and so on will be across all the other platforms that we have: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and so on. If you guys can give me a quick introduction into what inspired you to create the show. I know you gave a few different insights in that, and what makes it unique. There's so many football shows out there, not necessarily in the scouting world, but I think I really want to get the audience an understanding of, like, okay, why should they listen to another football show?
Yeah, I can kick start then. I think the point, like you said, there's so many football shows, so why another one? I think that was something we really wanted to take into account when starting. So our focus was always not to do it about something like a weekly match review or kind of stuff that is good for 2 days and then gone again when the next match comes around. There's so many of those shows, and it's not something that really interests us, and it's also not something where we feel like there's really a hole in the market, even that anybody needs another one of those. So for us, it was really about, putting football in a different light and really shining a light purely on scouting and talent development. I think specifically these are concepts that are crucial for modern football, especially when you look at the advent of video and the fact that you can really scout talent across the globe. I mean, we've watched matches basically on dirt roads in Africa, and with the right connections on LinkedIn or wherever, you can have a call with the player within 24 hours, right? So scouting is truly global, and clubs aren't necessarily utilizing that resource effectively. And people also who are interested in getting into these roles, like me, like Jacek did so long ago, don't necessarily even know where to start. Like, what even is scouting? Because a lot of people in the profession, be it club scouts or people working in agencies, there's kind of a sense that there's a real secrecy about what you do, right? It's a very competitive field. And if you have a database or you know a player, you don't want to ever tell anybody about that player. And it kind of comes to this really, I would say, an ugly competitiveness where even on Twitter, you see people go to the platform and say, oh yeah, this player scored a goal in the Champions League. Hey, look at this report I made 4 years ago. I was the first one to discover him. And I think that's something I really hope to get away from, where it should instead, for this podcast and also a lot of the other resources that we create, it should really be about educating people about scouting, showing people about kind of the unique approaches that different countries take, the different talent that countries are producing, how different clubs go about their scouting, and yeah, really actually learning from kind of the global talent pool and from scouts and from interesting people who represent these different regions.
Yeah, and we do it purely from passion. I mean, we don't do it to promote our names because our names are, well, we already promoted our names. We don't do it for money. We do it purely from passion. So we will touch the subjects. Yeah, we won't be talking about El Clasico every week. We won't be talking about El Clasico like never. So we won't be touching the subjects. I don't want to say underground, but surely not mainstream. And I think we will try to, educate people. There are so many people interested in scouting right now. I get so many messages on Twitter, on email. Please help me. Please show me the way. And I think, that through this channel, we'll be able to help many people, educate many people, and in the meantime, tell many really, really interesting stories and discover many, many exciting talents.
Yeah, and I think the fact about passion is really important, because I think, Jacek, you've met them as well. I've met them also. There's so many people working in clubs, working in agencies, in a scouting role, and they feel almost frustrated to say, hey, I want to be a coach, and they put me in scouting. I don't want to be doing scouting. Fine, I'll be the head scout. Or ex-players who land in scouting because it's just the easiest avenue to put them in. Versus, I think what me and Jacek also want to try and show through the show is that, this isn't necessarily just a means to becoming a sporting director or a means to going up in a football field and becoming a coach, but also something that should also be respected for its own right, because at the end of the day, finding the right talent and identifying exactly which players fit into your unique club model is what drives success at the end of the day, right? And I mean, the human resources are the most important aspect in a football club or in an organization of any kind. And I think that's what we also try and aim for in the unique stories that we tell on the Football Talent Show.
Yeah, I think I love the intersection of passion and education. For the Insiders Lounge, it was similar for me. I did 5 months in Europe, traveling around, meeting many different club executives, scouts, agents, players, so on. And I didn't know how to break into the industry. I didn't have an understanding of that. So when I got back, the hope was that through the Insiders Lounge, people can start to understand what even is a scout. You hear the name, you hear the actual title going around, but you don't actually know what a scout does on a day-to-day basis, and that can vary drastically throughout different regions of the world. So well said. I think that's a really clever idea in terms of a market that's open and hasn't been attacked yet in that way. I want to get a better understanding of the actual structure of episodes. So you guys have been able to record quite a few so far. So can we get into just what people can actually expect from listening into the Football Talent Show?
Yeah, so like we mentioned, we're doing either a club or country every week, and that's going to be rotating. So 1 week's a country, the next week's a club. And the point is basically that the podcasts stay alive over a longer period, right? So you can listen to a podcast that's 6 months old and you'll still get it's that same quality out of it that someone maybe listens to it live. It's not something that basically is gone in 2 days once the next slate of fixtures come about. I mean, it really is like that, right? You play on Saturday, you talk about the Premier League, then they lost on the weekend, everything's bad. Then they play again on the Wednesday in the Champions League, win that fixture, and suddenly everything's amazing, right? So I think that's kind of a difficulty in the modern fixture list that also kind of kills the quality of audio content that people produce. And for us, it's really about splitting things up into two halves. So the first half of each podcast goes a lot more into the background. So be it a country, it's about kind of the cultural landscape, how that influences talent identification and also development, and also about kind of the history of talent production. So take the example of Georgia with some, there's factors like, for example, being part of the Soviet Union, how that affected Georgian talent production, the kind of trailblazers in the early 2000s that almost paved the way for the current golden generation, you could say. And those are kind of the main themes we touched on in the first half. And then the second half, we try and go a little bit more into the nerd within each of us, where we go into some true talents. So talking about U19 talents, U23 talents, maybe foreign talents who are playing in the domestic league. And if we're talking about a club, then we go more into kind of 7 or 8 key talents to look out for from the youth academies. And I would say the most important aspect isn't me and Jacek, it's the guests that we have on. Because the guests are really what drive the show. Like Jacek said, I mean, you see in the people we talk to the passion that they have for what they speak about. Our second episode was about Chelsea, and we maybe touched for 2% of the episode on the first team and 90% of the episode on the current crop of U19 talents. And I mean, if I didn't edit the podcast, it would have been 4 hours long, right? We had to cut segments out because we could have gone on forever. Because once people have a passion and you can really hear that passion, you become infected by it. And I told Jacek after the show, I've probably watched maybe 5 Chelsea games in the past year or so because it's just not really my main interest. But I feel like I'd watch more of the U19 team now than the first team just because of the picture that our guests can paint. I think that's what we really try and get across.
Yeah, and I would also add that it's just the beginning. So we start with clubs and countries, but our plans are much bigger. So we will try to implement some new things as well, such as maybe even football quiz, which personally I'm a huge fan of. We will talk about also even let's say the dark side of football, because both me and Adam, we were inside this world and it's not as beautiful as many people can think of. So yeah, it's so exciting. The first 3 episodes were amazing, and it will just get better and better.
Jacek, you hinted at it there, so I'm going to ask you the next question. Looking ahead, what are some of the ideas you have? I know we've spoken through some different things, some quizzes, maybe some Q&As. Where do you see a show like this going?
Yeah, I have so many ideas. For example, we could do a watch along. So, for example, we could watch together with our viewers, let's say the final of the UEFA Youth League or the final of the World Cup under 17. Yeah, the quiz, as I already mentioned, it's a big project in my head. So far in my head, but yeah, it will be alive. And then we will be probably also doing the individual reports on players with videos. So the thing that I do on FTS website, we'll probably do also with on video. So the plans are big. We are just at the start. We are just beginning. So, but it's really an exciting project, and we are 2 passionate guys. And if you guys will watch the Chelsea episode, like the passion is coming out from the audio. So yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, I can only echo what Jacek's been saying. I think it's really important to kind of put these stories in the center stage. It's not about me and Jacek, it's about the stories and about the players and the context that we're trying to speak about. I think especially in youth football, you don't necessarily get these storylines, right? I think there's also a person behind the player in every case. And I think that's something where we also want to take into the future, where maybe we do some more content on the ground, even at various tournaments around the world, to even, get to know these people better. Because I think something that you also realize as a footballer is that, a lot of the perspective that people have on you is only to do with who they see in 90 minutes on the field, right? Versus the fact that, these people also have a bigger story to tell a lot of the time, and a lot of unique characteristics that will kind of quantify their football a lot more into kind of a human sense. So I think that's something that we also want to try and do, especially for these younger players who, maybe break onto the scene and are unknowns, but for us, maybe people can get a better sense of them from earlier.
Yeah, I think I look at like the GA Cup I attended last year, and when you see the commercialization of the US, there's so much potential for something like this in that space. They're slowly starting to gain traction on, you have Rising Ballers, you have Footy Access, a lot of these big Instagram accounts that are posting footage of them. But you're still not gaining the insights into who that player actually is, where he comes from, what's his play style like, because really the footage and the media coverage is limited in those regards. So I think adding a new edition like this, and again, just talking about these points and these players, I think it's so important. I wanted to do a little bit of like a pilot episode. So similar to what you guys have done with your first few episodes, but with you two as the guests, because I know throughout many episodes that you record in the future, you're not going to necessarily be the featured guest. So I wanted to be the first one to do so. So let's start off. Adam, if you want to start off with your favorite non-mainstream, since that's sort of the overall topic of your podcast, a non-mainstream country or region that's developing football in a unique way. And then we'll get into maybe some of your favorite talents and so on.
I think me and Jacek always say the future of football lies in Africa, and I think you can't ignore the continent in this context. I mean, it's on such a rise in a football sense. You had Morocco, obviously, at the 2022 World Cup, becoming the first African team in the semifinals, who we profiled pretty early in our show. But also, I mean, you look at youth tournaments, and constantly they're dominated by excellent African clubs. So many good African academies have been rising. So for mine, I'm of course going for an African country, and I'm going for Gambia. It's a country I've fallen in love with over the past years, from their senior sides, debut at the AFCON, going all the way to the quarterfinals, I believe it was the U23 AFCON where they made it to the final, or the U20 AFCON, one of the two. A really, really interesting country. And I think it's also important, especially for me and especially in the African context, that you also look at the development of the country itself and not just the football. And there's also some really interesting storylines across the fact that the country's average GDP is rising, the quality of life is rising, all these factors that are really go hand in hand with actual high-level football development. So that's my country. Maybe it's going to be featured on the Football Town show soon. I really hope so. And it's definitely one to continue to look out for, because, yeah, there's already so many top talents in Europe from Gambia.
I fully agree. The rise of Gambian football in the past decade was amazing. Well, I'm gonna go with my country, so I will stay in Europe, even though I really love African football. And as Adam said, the future of football lies in Africa. There is still passion there, the passion that we start to lack in Europe, in my opinion. But yeah, I will stay in Europe, and I will go. I always loved Balkan countries, Balkan football. So I will go to Montenegro. I think there are plenty of amazing talents in Serbia, for example. But yeah, they are heavily scouted. So the best the best academies like Partizan or Crvena Zvezda are heavily scouted by European powerhouses. And I think Montenegro is a small country, but with some really good academies, especially Budućnost Podgorica. And yeah, in recent years, I think I discovered. I wrote on a few talents that are making their name in Europe right now. So Vasilije Agic, and Adam is a big fan of Agic. I remember watching him against Poland under 17s, and yeah, wow, what a player! Well, this Montenegro under 17 team was huge. But yeah, Vasilije Agic was linked with Juventus, so yeah, a huge club. And I think it's a country where you can get good talents at a good price, let's say. Because if you go to Serbia, yeah, they know what they got, and they have rich clubs. Like Crvena Zvezda signed a player for, I think, 5 million recently. So, and when you go to Montenegro, you get quality for really good prices. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of Balkan football. They have this craziness. They were used to call the Brazil of Europe during my time, so 20 years ago. So yeah, my pick is Montenegro, but I would also like to mention countries like Kosovo and Norway. Norway, we all know that Scandinavia they're in the phase of a huge development of their talents. Like you go to Denmark, you see their youth teams, and you are like, wow. But I think Norway, they're still not aware of the amount of talent that they have, and you still can get players for reasonable prices.
I won't add any more countries. I think we can talk about this topic all day long. But Montenegro was one that I'll admit Jacek was the first one to show me the lovely 2006 generation of Montenegro, and there's so much talent. It's really cool to see one age group basically in Montenegro that is just miles ahead of pretty much every other age group in the country. And there's obviously some other rising talents, but the 2006 generation is simply astounding in Montenegro.
I still remember showing Marko Perovic. Right now he moved to Almeria, I think. And Marko Perovic wasn't the number one talent of the generation. The number one talent of the generation was Vasilije Agic. And I remember showing this kid, Marko Perovic, to one Ekstraklasa agent, so the Polish Ekstraklasa, and said, man, just look at him. And he came to me after like 2 hours and he said, wow, what a player. Man, he's like the number one talent in the Balkans. I said, no, he's not even the number one talent in his age category in Montenegro. And he was on his knees and he said, wow, this guy is 16 and I see him playing in the Polish Ekstraklasa with seniors in 1 year. In 1 year, he would be destroying the Ekstraklasa. So it also shows the amount of talent that we have in the Balkans and in Montenegro.
Every time I listen to you guys talk, I'm so humbled in terms of my footballing knowledge, because I feel to the general person, I probably have quite an elite level of knowledge. And then I speak with you guys and I'm totally lost in terms of the names of players and regions of the world that can develop such wonderful players. Let's get into the U23 category. I listened to the Georgian episode. We had a little pre-teaser that I could listen to, and it was unbelievable some of the knowledge you had in terms of players in Georgia, U23, but even younger. So you're maybe a unique U23 player, not necessarily your favorite or the most promising, but just someone that has a cool storyline or something unique about them. Jacek, if you want to start. I know it's a bit of a tricky question because there's so many options.
Yeah, can I just jump in? Can I just jump in really, really briefly? I also want to point out though, we say it's knowledge, but to be honest, like scouting is just like anything else. Like it's just watching football, right? It's not like Jacek or I have some inherent knowledge that every time we watch a video for 10 minutes, everything stays in our head. Like it's just about like anything, like learning how to play football. It's just watching football. And I think that's something we also try and show in scouting, that like a lot of people on Twitter, especially, they try and make it a rocket science about kind of the aerodynamics of a player and the biomechanics that the 15-year-old shows that will guarantee him his place in first team football. And it's never that complicated. I mean, if you see a good footballer, the chances are everybody else who also sees this footballer also sees something in it. Where things get more difficult is then identifying, is this the right player for this stage right now in his career? Or is this the right player for this team's playing style, right? Like fit and alignment, that's the difficult part. But finding talent is not a rocket science. And I think that's what we also want to tell people out there who are thinking about, how do I even get into scouting? It's so foreign, and look at a guy like Jacek, he knows so many players. How can I even compete? Just watch football, like watch local football. Don't even watch the Premier League. Just watch local football. Talk about players you like. Talk about clubs, people around you that maybe would be interested in the players, and then go from there. Because it's really it's not as complicated as some people want to make it seem.
Exactly. Like I always say that scouting is not rocket science. I think when I get these messages and people asking me, how do I scout? I just always answer them. Just watch football, be careful on details, and be consistent. Consistency is the key. If you are able to watch like 4 or 5 hours a day of football, then you can be a scout. And I see all these people making scouting so complicated on social media, like even inventing some words. It's really not that hard. You just need to be consistent and careful, like being able to spot the details, small details. So I fully agree with Adam here.
Yeah, sorry for derailing the podcast, Chad, but that's how things go when me and Jacek talk about football.
No, it's an important addition. And so in terms of when you guys discuss watching football, where are the places that you go in terms of resources for football in terms of finding information about players? I know you write your own reports, but you obviously find that information elsewhere. And then as well, in terms of watching, it can be difficult, obviously, if someone's younger and can't afford all these different subscriptions that are out there now. What are the best ways to actually watch football? You look at the likes of Y Scout and it's thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah, so of course Y Scout would be the best way, but if you can't afford Y Scout, there are plenty of games on YouTube, for example. Just look at in my reports, I always put a link to a player, to a game of a player. There are plenty of games of youth leagues, of Euro under 19s qualifiers. So if you really want to do it, you can find it easily. I often get this question, man, where do you find these games? I say, oh, Y Scout, but if not, just go to YouTube, man, and put in the search bar, put under 19. And you will see how many games from different championships like Bundesliga under 19, even Bayer Leverkusen stream their games. So if you really wanna start scouting, you will easily find the first materials to do it.
And I think to add on to that, there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, I want to start with scouting. Let me watch the rising talents in the Premier League." And I understand. I mean, that's obviously the most interesting and it's the highest level of football. But a lot of times it's like the resources Jacek has mentioned, like the Georgian First Division. Every game is streamed on YouTube. I know it's maybe not the most exciting, but that's what's going to make you kind of have the edge in the industry because you're watching something that other people aren't watching. Like I can guarantee you, and maybe it's a hard truth, but anybody who's trying to get into scouting, who wants to write a scouting report about, I don't know, Dejan Kulusevski, you're not going to have the best scouting report on Dejan Kulusevski out there. That's the hard truth, unfortunately. But the random player playing for Dilagori in the Georgian top flight, if you put a scouting report online about him, then the chances are people will actually see it because it's the only one about him online. And I think that's where people need to understand also that, you know, you shouldn't shy away from the fact that you're watching inherently poor leads, right? These are, in the end of the day, the leads where people actually can, where you can build a reputation because you're not going to become the voice for the Premier League in scouting. It's just not going to happen in this lifetime.
Yeah, I think the most hardcore game that I've watched was the third division in Estonia. I still remember the team name was Jotka Tabasalu. And I mean, the level was lower than the level that I play now with my pals, I think. No, I'm kidding, but the level was really low. And as Adam said, if you want to make your name in scouting, like start discovering talents, for people, so that people see your passion, that you are not just let's call it a Premier League watcher, but you are a guy who's ready to do really a lot to make his name in scouting.
Yeah, in football we have a good weather player. Those are the ones that like only show up when there's a nice weather outside, when there's a good game in front of fans, a nice pitch, and I guess a good weather scout are the ones that only want to watch the Premier League. I can say that one of the first matches I ever watched was a match in Guinea-Bissau, or one of the first paid scouting opportunities I ever had was watching a match in Guinea-Bissau where I didn't even have a team sheet. And the players had different jerseys on and stuff. So instead of writing names, I wrote orange boots, yellow socks, short hair, and that's how I tried to identify which players were which. So yeah, I would say the earlier you start in a career, maybe even the harder the scouting assignments are. But embrace the challenge, I would say.
You guys mentioned a lot of great regions, different leagues, different divisions within a country. What is one league or tournament that is super underappreciated and that you recommend people watch more? Jacek, if you want to start.
The Estonian third division, Jacek, is that your pick?
or your men's league on a Sunday.
Well, the most, let's say, underrated league in world football, I would say, Norwegian. As I said, Norway, they have cool clubs. So, for example, Molde and Rosenborg, so very well-known club, but also some smaller ones. And there are plenty of young players there. They use plenty of youngsters. So, yeah, I would say go to Norway. The quality of the league is not maybe the highest, but I would still say, it's let's say mid-table in Europe. And plus, you can almost be sure that if you'll watch a game, there will be at least 3, 4, 5 under 21s. Interesting to watch.
Yeah, and also a lot of foreign U21s. I mean, Norway's a really integrated country, which are very open to foreigners. So there's a lot of Africans that have also taken the step. Victor Boniface, of course, is kind of the primary one, but many others.
David Fofana, for example, as well.
Another good example. For me, I would go with the Portuguese second division, and specifically to find wingers and forwards, because it's just an absolute goldmine for talent. I mean, Portugal in general is always a great avenue into Europe for South American players, specifically Brazilian players. And I don't think we need to speak a lot about the quality that Brazil has in producing forwards. And what's so great about the Portuguese second division is the fact that, I mean, which is not great for Portugal, but for the rest of Europe, is the fact that Portuguese second division really has quite low salaries. So you can actually get these talents that are at a super high level. And for countries like Romania, countries like the Czech Republic, countries like Poland, they're just pristine talents to integrate directly into the top flight. So it's a great league to find forwards in. And then I would say the non-negotiable that any club should be recruiting. And if you're not recruiting it, then it's really hard to even take your scouting serious, is the U17 AFCON. Because it's just the most important competition, in my opinion. You're getting players that are on the verge of turning 18, so you get them basically right before they're able to make the step to Europe. And you're finding players that aren't necessarily in the mainstream competition like a U17 AFCON. Like a U17 World Cup. Once the African players are at the U17 World Cup, it's impossible for any mid-sized club to find them. But for example, an African talent who doesn't qualify for the U17 World Cup, but is maybe this tiny little bit worse, will never make the move to Europe because he never is in the U17 World Cup screen. And the U17 AFCON is just as televised, just as available. So it should really be at the top of any serious club's recruitment model.
Definitely, even the second tier talents at the AFCON, I would say 50% of them are good enough for Europe. Mm-hmm. So for me, I would also say the AFCON under 17 and the CONMEBOL Sudamericano under 15, which actually finished a few days ago, and the Paraguay won. So a big surprise. And if we are on the topic of second division, I also need to mention Ligue 2. So the second division in France. I think, the amount of talent in France is crazy. They have probably around 15, 20 top academies, including the ones in the second division and in the third division. I remember collaborating with the second division club in Italy, and the chief scout asked me, what two divisions should we concentrate on? And I told him, like, Norway, of course, because I think players from Norway would still move to the second to Serie B in Italy. They would still be interested in moving to Serie B, and even the Ligue 2, so the second division French players, should be interesting as well. So I told him, let's concentrate on Norway and Ligue 2, as in France, like, there are talents on the trees, let's say.
No, well said. You mentioned the trend of having African footballers or the African continent as a whole sort of rising in terms of the talent actually now being available and more scouts heading that way. I'm curious, any other trends or developments you see within youth football, but just football scouting as a whole, that might be interesting for people to know now as they listen in?
I would say one of the big ones is the professionalization of academies in your third world countries. So, for example, in Africa specifically, you have like Generation Foot in Senegal, but also in academies like ZFC in Egypt, the Mohammed VI Academy in Morocco. There's a lot of these academies that are being built up in Africa immediately, which completely changes the game because you're able to then bring coaches in from Europe, and you're able to build up kind of a connection with clubs in Europe from a much earlier age than when the players are actually available to move to Europe at the age of 18. So whereas in the past you would really only start scouting at the U17 AFCON maybe, or for many clubs only at a U20 level African talents, now they're actually getting pictures of players from 14, from 15, from 16. And I mean, like with any organization, any job, the more data you have, the more informed your decisions can be. So that's a huge step the fact that these African clubs are not only professional enough to then send their players abroad for trials at younger ages, to go to tournaments in Europe, to even invite clubs over, like ZFC did a few months ago, inviting clubs from Europe. That's a really, really important development and a good development that is just going to help football as a whole.
So I'm going to highlight the problem actually in football, in youth football, in my opinion. So the agents, there are too many shady agents, problematic agents that only think about money, not about the future of a player. And I think a huge problem in like nowadays is the lack of guidance for young footballers. So their surroundings, so the agents, the family, friends, they have no idea about football and they give bad advices. And today, bad choices can really ruin your career.
No, that's very well said.
There's so many examples, specifically when we go to Africa, about like the influence of social media also on players. The fact that an agent can get in touch so easily, or an agent can get in touch so easily with a player through kind of these social networks. And it's a huge problem that I personally don't even see a solution to. I really don't know even how you get this in check.
Yeah, and like bad career choices can be as bad as injuries, for example. Really, I saw careers being ruined, absolutely ruined by the agent who was a very dishonest guy. So yeah, big problem. But yeah, as Adam said, the solution, there is no solution. Like yeah, but let's, at least me and Adam, we try to make the world better place in football. But yeah, I think we are too small to improve it that much.
I think you'll be surprised what a little bit of consistency does in terms of the media side. You'll never know who you can influence. So hopefully always for the positive. You guys had a question that you mentioned before we started recording, and I know Jacek and both you, Adam, you guys have unique interests outside of football, which is always so cool to hear. What other things you do within your day? So Jacek, if you want to start with some of your other interests that you have besides football, and then Adam, if you want to follow along.
Yes, okay. So I have two more passions, much smaller than football, obviously. So let's say football takes like 95% of my life, and then I have this small 5% that I try to give to ski jumping. So this is my second favorite sport, and the second sport that I follow, and I have only two sports that I follow. So the second one is ski jumping. I love ski jumping. I started watching ski jumping before I started even watching football. So big fan of that, and cinema, like movies and shows. So a huge fan of science fiction. My favorite movie, Predator. So the legendary movie with Arnie, and this movie was made in 1987, so the year of my birth. Absolutely love science fiction. Nowadays, Marvel, DC. I also like reading comic books. I don't really have time for that, so I go more into movies. But yeah, I would say ski jumping and cinema make my 100% Jacek Kulig. So 95% of football and 5% ski jumping and movies.
I had no idea about the ski jumping. Maybe we start a podcast on ski jumping next. I had no idea.
I could elaborate on that for hours on ski jumping. Really, I'm a fan. I'm a true fan.
You make a joke, but whenever me and Jacek talk about how crooked the football industry is, Jacek always says, "Man, I just want to give it all up and become the ski jumping talent scout." So it's in the works. It's in the works. As for me, I don't think I have an as outlandish interest as Jacek in ski jumping. That one also took me by surprise when he mentioned it the first time. When we're talking about a sport context, I'm pretty much always a team sport guy. And I would say the two that I enjoy the most would be basketball and handball outside of football. I think they're a good contrast to football. Also, they're pretty much just faster versions of football, right? There's a lot more transitions, smaller field, but still a lot of same principles. I do a lot of work for analysis and broadcast in Germany here for competitions like the Champions League, like the World Cup and the Euros also. And when I work with commentators, even sometimes to explain football concepts, I'll use basketball examples Like there's examples of how Croatia finds space in wide channels for crosses. And you can use a lot of examples. I remember using one from the Atlanta Hawks, how they get their 3-point shooter open on the wide side of the arc to put in a 3-point shot, which is basically the same as how Croatia uses off-ball runs to create space for a cross into the box. So there's a lot of similar principles that you can use there. And the other thing that I really, really love is music. I think music is my second passion. A lot of people always say, oh, when you scout, you need to have the commentator on because they give special insight that you may not have heard of. And I try to adhere by it, but there's also some nights where it's like 9 p.m. I'm tired and I say, okay, I will scout, but the last thing I want to do is watch a U17 game with some commentator who barely even knows the players and is probably getting $20 to commentate the game. So then I will normally turn off the commentator and put on an album. And I try and also do like music scouting almost. So looking for new artists, looking for new songs that kind of resonate.
What's the go-to at the moment, or something that you have like? What I'm trying to imagine Adam scouting a U17 game. What playlist does he have in his ears?
Yeah, so it's always something different. I always go on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia always has an updating list throughout the years of the best albums of 2024. And after every year, I always make a playlist, which is the best songs in my opinion of 2024. And then on Twitter, I always post my top 20 albums, and it gets like 2 likes because everybody's just stick to football. I didn't come here for music, stick to football. It gets a lot of hate, but it's my personal project. And I listened like last year, for example, I listened 95,000 minutes on Spotify. So really, I mean, I always have headphones in.
Wow.
It's kind of, I think me and Jacek are both introverted in that sense, where we'd rather listen to someone else talk and not have to respond unless it's about football. But for me, I'll give it away now. For me, the best album of the year was by the Middle Kids. And people can look that up. It's a great album. One of my favorites.
Never heard of it. So that
little bit of indie rock, indie pop from Australia. So one of my favorites.
It's really funny that you mentioned it, that you listen to music while watching players. I have some shows on while I scout very often. So I have my favorite shows on, mostly comedy like South Park, Married with Children, and Malcolm in the Middle. So as you said, for example, today I was watching Odense BK under-17s, and I had Married with Children on because the audio from the game was awful. So yeah, I had Married with Children. And as for music, I like music too. And I just want to say my favorite band of all time, and I would like to hear yours, Adam, and yours, Chad. So yeah, my favorite band of all time is Iron Maiden.
Oh, my first concert ever was Iron Maiden. And Iron Maiden.
Wow.
Iron Maiden was one of those where, Chad, we're getting really off topic, but it's fine.
No, I'm trying to think of my favorite band.
But I would say a lot of my early interests were shaped by my dad, because that's, I think, how it starts a lot. So that's why I got into Iron Maiden. One of his first concerts was Iron Maiden in Dortmund. And then it was kind of cool that my first concert with him was an Iron Maiden in Philadelphia. So that was kind of an interesting moment. I would say Linkin Park was another one that my dad showed me that kind of stuck with me forever. But my favorite band, which you've probably never heard of, is Rainbow Kitten. Surprise. They have a very, very odd name. I know. They're an indie band from Colorado, I believe. And they're one of my favorites. So I'll put that in. Chad, come on, man.
Which one?
You're the host here.
Jacek, which one did you say was your favorite?
Iron Maiden.
Oh, Iron Maiden. Okay, so I'll tell you this: I'm not I am a music person, and I'm not. So I've been to like one concert ever, and it was Bryan Adams. He's Canadian, right? Do you even know who this is?
He's a country singer, right?
Something along those lines. I'm the worst person to ask. I think he's Canadian, and he did a concert here. You'll maybe know. I think it's Summer. Is he Summer of '69? I think he's the one that's saying that, which would be his most common one. So that's the only concert I've ever been to. In terms of a band, I listen to all different genres of music, so kind of across the board. I don't know if I have a band. Maybe an artist. Do you know Noah Kahan? Adam, maybe you know him.
Yeah.
That's but that's like the total opposite of what. Yeah, I don't know how to say his name, but I don't even think Jacek would know of his existence.
No,
like the total opposite of what he pays attention to.
This is not what what music would be playing in a Polish household. I can tell you that.
No.
Yeah. And if someone asked me who's the favorite singer of Chad, I would say Taylor Swift.
No, definitely not Taylor Swift. I will. Okay, here I have a good memory. I have a good story to tell. I used to play guitar band. What is it? Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero when I was growing. This has turned into one of our Google Meets calls. But anyways, I used to play Guitar Hero when I was growing up, and no one ever wanted to play drums, and so I would play drums on Guitar Hero. And the only soundtrack that we had on there was the Beatles. So I do actually love the Beatles. And Yellow Submarine, we used to just play the same song over and over again. So if anyone ever wants to have a competition on Guitar Hero and do the drumming part of Yellow Submarine, I probably will beat you.
Imagine saying, I love the Beatles, and then they ask, oh, how'd you get into the Beatles? Guitar Hero.
Guitar Hero.
You need to watch the South Park episode with Guitar Hero. It's a really cool one.
I'll have to add it to the playlist. All right, let's get into. We got some quick fire questions here to end it off. Jacek, you had a good answer the last time for if you could sit down with one person for a meal, dead or alive, who would it be? And I think you gave us an Atletico Madrid like legend from back in the day. Do you remember?
Yeah. Fernando Torres, and he.
No, I think it was.
Oh yeah,
it was another name as well. It was Fernando Torres and another one.
Yeah, so remember? It would be Jesus Gil, so the former president of Atletico.
That's it.
He wasn't a good person, actually. He wasn't a good guy, but he would still be a really interesting guy to talk with.
So do you have an additional one if you had a third person at the table, or maybe a separate dinner?
Yeah, probably Koke from Atletico, so the current captain, the legend, the absolute legend. So my three guys would be Koke, Fernando Torres, and Jesus Gil. And so the three guys that really loved and still love Atletico, and yeah, it would be a pure pleasure to chat with them.
Adam, do you have one?
I think we should add that if nobody got it by now, Jacek's an Atletico Madrid fan.
Yeah,
it's kind of easy to suffice from that. I did one football one and one non-football one. For football, I said Tim Walter. I think he's my favorite coach at the moment. Doing really innovative stuff. I really miss him in German football. He's at Hull City now. So a really cool coach, kind of like a cult figure like Marcelo Bielsa, where you say that maybe he won't reach the absolute pinnacle of the game, but amongst those in football circles, he's revered higher than his output on the game. And then non-football, I put Malcolm Gladwell. He's my favorite author. He also wrote a really good book, Outliers, which is kind of where the 10,000 hour rule comes from, which is, I think, also a good concept to relate back to scouting and in general, just output in any direction. I think scouting is one of those things where, like, a lot of people talk about PFSA courses, certifications, these badges, and I think those things can be helpful, especially as an entry level if you really don't know where to start. But I think for me and Jacek, it's always been just scout, just watch games, just put in the hours, learn, watch how this player grew, even maybe go back in time and say, okay, let's watch Victor Osimhen when he was 17 years old and playing in Nigeria, and what can I see in his game that could have maybe foreshadowed the career he had now. All these things I think are really just going back to the simple principle of just put in the time, put in the effort. And I think Malcolm Gladwell is really one of the forerunners there. So yeah, I'll have him over for dinner and maybe cook some chicken pasta, because that's all I can.
And if I can, I would just add something. Like this piece of paper that Adam said. Yeah, all these courses. It's only a piece of paper. It won't replace the real knowledge and passion. And if I could just pick two more people, so one non-Atletico guy.
This is a really busy dinner that you have.
It's like a round table at this point.
But yeah, I love discussing. I love discussion. I love to talk. So I will pick one non-Atletico guy. So I will pick Ralf Rangnick. So for me, the real visionary. I remember defending him during his time at United. But yeah, okay, it's a whole different story. His time at United wasn't successful, but it wasn't his fault, and I will die on that hill. And the second non-football guy, I would pick Seth MacFarlane. So Seth MacFarlane, the Orville, the Family Guy, an absolute genius in my opinion.
I'm just laughing
voice
because
actor.
I'm just laughing because Seth MacFarlane is so out of place at this dinner. We have Atletico players, Ralph Rangnick and Seth MacFarlane from Family Guy, but I'm sure you guys will all get along.
Of course.
I think the last addition is your girlfriend. Would that be an important addition, or maybe not?
No, I don't think because she doesn't like football and she's not. Well, she actually likes Family Guy, so maybe I would invite her to this Seth MacFarlane part of the dinner.
No, that's good. It gives some good insight. I think this is overall a good episode in terms of getting a better understanding of the show, and I think your personalities is the most important part. Adam, I think if you want to finalize just in terms of where people should go to see the show, to follow the show, to see more of both of your content, and then we can wrap things up.
Yeah, the podcast, the first episode that dropped on Georgia, which will be live by now, should be linked in the description here. If Chad likes us, then it'll be linked. If Chad has some beef with us by Saturday, then I guess not, but we're hoping for the best. And otherwise, I would just say for continuous updates, follow me and Jacek on Twitter, on Instagram as well, especially Jacek on Instagram. At me, you can find at @Sets, Adam Khan @Sets, and Jacek at F Talent Scout, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant, guys. I appreciate your time coming on, and yeah, I look forward to the new episodes releasing each Thursday. I think if we haven't said it already, every Thursday. But besides that, yeah, thanks again for your time, and we'll speak soon.